Hello and welcome to the Collective Conspiracy Show. Already got one watching. You're keen. Apologies to anyone that might care. I did push last week's show back to this week because I had the lurgy, had a really sore throat. Ended up getting really phlegmy, which of course I'm asthmatic as well, so I have to be careful there. And I just didn't want to essentially talk for an hour on and off because my throat would have hurt. Andrew's coming on in a second. He's just here now. I'll just let him get settled before I bring him in. Welcome everybody to the show. If you're watching live or if you're going to be watching at a later time. Hi David. Don't forget, either give StreamYard permission for your name or pop your name at the end. It wasn't COVID, Martin, no. But then I never got tested, so I don't know. Lol. So, thank you for joining. We're going to be talking UFOs, and I've got no doubt we will. I think I want to start off actually talking about COVID with the latest announcement from Boris Johnson. Yes, Marty, we are live tonight. Thank you for checking in on me last week. Much appreciated. We'll bring in Andrew. Okay. Hi, Andrew. You okay?
I'm fine, thanks. Are you feeling recovered now, Kieran?
Just it's still kind of on the chest.
Right.
Coughing up that kind of horrible stuff.
Yeah.
But I'd managed to play football late last week, which I thought was a bad idea, but I was okay. I've just got to be careful, like I say, because my asthma and stuff. When I get that kind of thing, I just have to be careful. And then Larry got it, my 1 year old, so it was we knew about that then. It was just
it does.
I just want to start. So I know we said we'd talk about UFOs, and I'm keen to talk about the Pentagon report that was released late last month. But I do want to just start with COVID, because I don't know if you're aware, but Boris Johnson made an announcement 3 hours ago or so.
I wasn't aware.
No, I knew you wouldn't be.
No. So I'm waiting with this big, Cheshire Cat smile to see what shite,
Well, I mean, shite is someone's put COVID is like UFOs; they both don't exist. I agree with you on the COVID thing. Basically, what he said that face masks essentially will be scrapped, social distancing will be scrapped. Everything will be scrapped on the 19th. He's confident of it. In fact, I think he's basically saying it will be. The problem I have with that is that I think they're going to put it into the hands of the private companies, a bit like the vaccine passports. And so I think you're still going to get some really Hitler-esque type people. Let's say you want to go for a meal at a chain restaurant, like a Harvester or something, and they still insist that you wear a mask, despite it now being, not necessary. The government have kind of wiped it away now. But they say, well, you're on private property, and I insist that you wear a mask. Can you see it going that way, more in the hands of the private?
Possibly. I mean, certainly that's what's happening in the US, isn't it? I mean, I've read bits and pieces from the US, although I haven't reposted many of them, where state governors have said, no, don't need masks anymore. And the business said, oh, no, we're keeping them. So, you better, when you come here, you better wear them. And people said, no, there's big arguments broken out. And people have, pushed for this way and that way with it. So it might be another divisive tactic. As well as the sort of the corporate angle that you've mentioned there too. So that I think it's just more division tactics, and people are going to be saying, "Well, is this because of the vaccine?" Did he mention the vaccine? I don't know.
Well, of course, I didn't watch it, Andrew. I mean,
Right.
I've seen the headlines from what he said. I mean, there's better things to watch other than that. We had Fireman Sam on. Much better things than that drivel. But yeah, for me, it's kind of, a lot of people have been saying today, it's double speak again. It's we're getting rid of it, but then they're not really getting rid of it at the same time. A lot of people, of course, are thankful for the freedoms that were taken away by the same bloke who's now giving them back in bits. And for me, it's you might have a bit of freedom, but importantly, the emergency powers still stay in place. Until September, so they can flick that switch at any time again, and back we go.
That's it, and I think they cooked up the statistics all the time, so they might just say, "Well, we'll leave the mask thing for a couple of weeks," and then they'll fudge the figures again, and say, "Oh, well, we've got to do something else now, like the third vaccine dose or whatever crap they've got planned." and there's these various leaked memos and stuff, isn't there? Like that Ferguson thing, which was fake.
Yeah.
I think we're pretty sure about that it was fake, but there may be sort of documents that have circulated which have said similar things. And of course, Alex Thompson, who does a slot on UK Column, he posted something, I think, out to his email list. Somebody sent me this, but this was back in April, and that said something quite similar to what the fake Ferguson memo was saying. And this, of course, is a tactic that I think they used in the UFO community as well. Sort of nice segue. They see what I did there.
I like that. Yeah.
and the MJ12 documents. Some people say, "Oh, well, these are fake documents because the type style wasn't used in that year, or something, or this typewriter wasn't invented or made until 3 years after these documents." Something like that, But that doesn't mean to say the documents or the content of the documents is fake. And certainly one of my contacts, who's now sadly deceased, Edgar Fouché, he said that when he was getting into all that stuff, some of which, I interviewed him for about 4 or 5 hours, and that's on my YouTube channel. He said that a guy that he was in contact with had a copy of the alien autopsy report, and his dad had given it to him. From the 40s or 50s, whenever it was, and he had that document, but he didn't photocopy it. He just retyped it. So he just retyped the thing, and then he gave a copy to Edgar Fouché. I think he destroyed the original document. So that's a way. So it's a fake document, but the contents of it could be real. So again, I think this might have possibly happened. It's a common tactic where they will release something that's actually based on truth, but when it comes out, it's declared a fake because of details have been changed.
Well, I think just before we do fully go on to the UFO thing, the one thing I'll say is a couple of people shared some things with me on Twitter, and I do go on LinkedIn for work. And the amount of people that are actually protesting this announcement and are saying no, masks should be here until at least Christmas, and social distancing needs to remain. And the one that sticks in my mind, there was a poll: will you continue to wear a mask after the 19th of July? And I think it was something like 46% saying no, and 54% saying yes, they will continue to wear a mask.
Yeah, and I mean this is the new normal, isn't it? That's what they use that phrase, and people have become normalized with it. It's like, and it's one of those things that they've proved that people can get used to this, and just becomes part of their daily lives now, and it's incredible, really.
People. Oh yeah, you broke up a lot there, Andrew. Actually.
I don't know why that is.
I don't know if anybody could hear that, but I definitely didn't. Do you want to repeat what you said, just in case?
Yeah, I mean, it's just normalizing it, and it's become part of people's normal lives, and they just think, oh, I'll wear a mask now, and it's protecting me from something. I don't quite understand it, but yeah, I'll wear it.
Yeah, it's I don't get it. Right, on to the UFO report, in case people have tuned in, they've had enough of COVID. So someone's put, wasn't the disclosure only based on 144 reports from 2001 to 2017? Absolutely, it was.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a copy of that document here. I downloaded it. Well,
brilliant. I think it was 6 pages.
It was 9 pages. I can just share it if you want, and just have a quick.
You're breaking up again. I said, Andrew, if you just leave, if you leave and then come back in,
okay, I'll
do that. And I'll just see what the connection's like then.
Okay.
Sorry about that, guys. Just put in the comment section if we're both okay. I don't know if it's my end or if it's Andrew's end. I'm not sure. But my internet seems to be fine. I can see myself. So again, thank you for joining us. We're just a little bit there about COVID, and we will talk about, of course, we will start to talk about the UFOs. So someone has mentioned, wasn't the disclosure only based on 144 reports from 2001 to 17? Absolutely right. It wasn't the best report, to be honest. It didn't really give a lot. Hello.
Any better?
I think so. Well, we'll see.
Carry on anyway, see what happens.
Okay, well, my internet's showing full. Martin's put it's your end, so I don't know if I'm not looking great. Let me just, I think I can, this is quite
You're coming through clear through to me, Kieran. I've not had any problems from your
Okay,
audio
great.
action,
Um,
if that's any help.
I'm just kind of tuning in because I can just watch myself, as vain as that sounds.
Okay.
Yeah, I look okay. Well, yeah, look beautiful. So yeah, was it 6 pages, the report? I don't think it was very
It's
big.
9 pages. Yeah, I've got it here. So we'll have a look at it. And if you, of course, discount the title page, that's you're down to 8 pages. And then if you go to the end, I think you've got an appendix of 1 or 2 pages, is it?
So it is actually
appendix 1
it's
page.
about 6 pages then.
It's really about sort of 7 pages.
And from what I gather, they kind of said. In fact, I've got this quote highlighted because it stood out to me. There's no clear indications that there is any non-terrestrial explanation, but at the same time, they didn't really rule that out. What is the point of that report?
Yeah, well, there you are. If you read it, I mean, I read through it, and it basically says, look, we might have found some weird stuff, from that our pilots have seen and some ships have seen, but we're not really sure. So just give us a load of money, and then we can start classifying it all and write up the reports properly, and then we'll know what it is, and we can. And it's probably a threat to national security, so we must, deal with it because it's important to our national security. That's basically what it says. We don't know what this is. We think it's important. So you should give us some money. That's what it says. I think we need. It says we need funding to start a classification system. Efforts are underway to standardise incident reporting across U.S. military services and other government agencies to ensure all. Is it breaking up again?
Yeah, we're having some really bad connection issues today.
Well, let me just. What I might try and do is I might just disconnect my cable and see if everyone hearing you okay.
Whatever you're saying, Andrew, just put it into the chat so I can. Because I can't hear you.
Okay. I will reconnect. I'm going to reconnect.
Okay, he's gone again. Yeah, so basically this report said that there was no clear indications that there is any non-terrestrial explanation for the aircrafts that had been spotted. I mean, to only base these reports on, as someone's pointed out, 144 reports when there's so many around the world, doesn't really sit right with me, and I don't necessarily see the point of the report. Okay, so people watching this are saying they can hear both of us fine. Well, I can't hear Andrew, so maybe that's my issue. If you can both hear us fine, then I'll just carry on and I'll pretend I can hear what Andrew's saying. Hiya. People watching are saying they can hear you. They can hear both of us absolutely fine.
Oh, right. So it's just somewhere in between then.
It's something to do with us, yeah. I don't really get it.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thanks, guys, for sticking with us. Not going very well so far.
We'll see how it goes. I've just reconnected, so.
Okay, fine. I mean, if it carries on being crap, then we'll just have to. I'm not going to carry on. We'll try again another day.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So you were pointing out that basically it's someone talking about money, the financial side of things.
Yeah, they're saying that we've seen these things, we need to classify them, we need to report them better. And it's just a joke because they've set up, the National Reconnaissance Office. We've had whistleblowers in the past who've worked for them, describing in detail various cases, that they've picked up on radar, and they've been told, not to write them down. There was a guy particularly, I don't think it was the NRO, but that's what he was told. They picked up an object flying across the eastern seaboard of the US, and he was told that you don't write this down. You just take note of it, but you don't write it down anywhere. And so for them to say, "Oh yeah, we need a reporting system," it's clearly and patently ridiculous. That reporting system has been in place. I mean, for heaven's sake, they had Blue Book in the 1960s, and they've done a whole TV series about that. I mean, come on. I mean, this has got to be for very, very green people. You
I
know,
think something I mentioned, I had Dave Hodrin on that a while back, the chairman of BUFOG, who we both know.
yeah.
And he, something that I tried to get over to Dave was, to me, it's almost like they're trying to rebrand UFOs. Of course, we have the new
Oh yeah,
term,
yeah,
UAPs,
yeah.
unidentified aerial phenomena.
That's right.
It's almost like it's for a new generation of UFO believers or UFO researchers.
Yes.
And they're trying to erase everything that's ever happened before by saying we've never covered anything up. We've never, had any secret projects
Yeah.
or secret crashes or whatever. It all starts from now, and I wonder what the reasoning is for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and I think you can see a similar thing has happened with a lot of other areas. I mean, I think, we were talking about science fiction at one point, and people have observed. I mean, Dave Cullen, who's done a lot of videos on COVID, he runs this Computing Forever channel, which was deleted from YouTube 5-6 months ago. And he did a lot of videos about Doctor Who, and he had one, the title of which stuck in my mind, was the vandalization of Doctor Who, and how they put all this identity politics in it.
Yes,
They've done the same with Star Trek as well. And Carl James has, I've not watched the very newest Star Trek series, Star Trek Discovery, I think it was called. And again, they've rewritten a lot of the history of Star Trek. They've changed, they've put extra things in about the characters which weren't there before and all this. And then they had a new one with Picard, Captain Picard of Next Generation. Again, I haven't watched that, but that was the same sort of thing. They actually inverted Picard's character, where he became vengeful, and I think he was going after people, where he was never like that in the original series. He was against all that type of mentality, or mostly anyway. This is the inversion of things, and it's like the inversion of the NHS as well, which has now become the National Harm Service with these vaccinations being put out.
I think it's for me the whole point of this report. I saw a lot of people, because I do keep a foot in the UFO I guess world, and people were very excited about it coming out, and I just didn't see the point of it. And then, of course, when you read it and you see the main focus points of it, there wasn't really any point to it. They're still not admitted anything, but yet they haven't ruled anything out. It just hasn't added anything.
Exactly, and so you know that there is a big agenda behind this, and I'm pretty sure I know what that is. And I did an article about it. I think we did mention this a couple of 3 weeks ago.
Yes,
we last talked about it.
Go into that, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty clear to me, at least, what's going on. And most of the UFO community aren't talking about this. I think one of the few that is a chap called Daniel List, who has this moniker of dark journalist, and he's on YouTube. His channel, unfortunately, hasn't been deleted. He's done some very good research, and he's also very critical of a lot of the other UFO researchers, sometimes without naming them. People like Richard Dolan, for example, who I've had a kind of a bit of ding-dong of a relationship with, which I've written about, and he interviewed me a few years ago. And he's kind of going along with this. Oh yeah, well they are starting to report something, officially now. But then again, they've done this before. They have released documents before. People can go back to the Clinton administration, when Clinton, for whatever reason, got 1,000 pages of previously classified documents released, and Grant Cameron covered a lot of that on his website. And then we found out, the photographs of Lawrence Rockefeller meeting with the Clintons. And we found that Hillary Clinton had been given a copy of Paul Davis' book, which was called, I think, Life in the Universe, was it? Or I can't remember the title. I've got an article about that from
who was it? I can have a look.
I'll try and find it on my website. Let's see. I'll try and find the article. Let's just see. And that was because Grant Cameron had waited 10 years, I think, to get some photographs from. Oh crikey! He done a freedom of information request, and he got these photographs released. let me just see if I can find this. And these showed that the Clintons met with the Lawrence Rockefeller, and they exchanged something. And Hillary Clinton was given a copy of this book. Let's see again if I can find the article. And so it proves there was stuff going on. Let's see.
But you've touched there, Andrew, on Richard Dolan, and someone's made a good point there, Martin. Dolan talks but doesn't really say that much. There's a lot of people like this.
Yes.
I guess people call them gatekeepers. I've always wondered what that means, but I'm beginning to see now. And we've spoken off air quite a lot about the likes of Nick Pope.
Oh yeah,
who is an enigma? He's not an enigma to me because I think I've sussed him out. But I've genuinely seen Nick Pope on TV shows where it's talking about how UFOs are rubbish, how they're fake, and he's going along that narrative. And then I've seen him on another TV show where he's going along the narrative of UFOs are real, and he investigated them for the British X-Files in the MOD. And it's like whoever's paying his wage, he tends to sit on that side of the fence. And
exactly.
I watched a talk of his at Awakening in Manchester a couple of years ago, and he started it with, I can't tell you much because otherwise they will kill me. And I thought, well, that's a great start to an hour and a half lecture. And then spent the next 90 minutes basically showing us pictures of his desk and a door this is the door I used to go through when I was at the MOD, and this is the desk I sat at, and there's a little bit of paperwork. Of course, you couldn't see anything; it was just paper. And I was sat there thinking, I could have got up and done this. I could have got up and said, I've worked for the MOD. And interestingly, I think it was only a couple of months ago I saw it circulating that an old high-rank officer within the MOD came out and said that actually Nick Pope had never worked on UFOs within the MOD. And that's an interesting take now, because that's something I've always thought.
Yeah, I mean, there was talk many years ago about him being just a disinformation agent. And, I think, I can't remember if we covered this before, but you just need to go onto his website. I'll try and show people the page. Let's see if it says it. And he actually says he's a paid spokesperson.
Yes, yeah.
On his website, on the page, which is, saying that you can get, you can get him to do. He does media work, and he's a
whatever you want him to say.
Yeah. In fact, I'll show you that. We may have shown this in a previous show, but I think it's worth showing again. Here's his website, and you can see it doesn't say it in the title of the actual page in terms of text, but if you look at the URL on the website there, you can see that the URL says paid spokesperson.
Paid spokesperson, yeah.
On the URL. And this 7-Eleven in the background, that's sort of slightly interesting. Of course, some would take that as symbolism. Why is he coming out of a 7-Eleven with this number 8 on the cup? I don't know if there's anything in that. If there's some secret, symbols traveling across there. But, the guy just... He will just say whatever needs to be said to fit an audience.
It seems that way, yeah.
Yeah, I've written a bit about Nick Pope in my book, Acknowledge, which is free to download. So if people are, if I'm jumping around a lot, which I probably am, then I encourage people to download my book, which is on this page here. I'll share my screen again. There you go. So you can download that. If you scroll down, there's a little video I made, and then there's a synopsis there, and it's about UFOs, aliens, and crop circles. It's got nearly 1,000 references in there, 980 odd references, 34 chapters, and I go through a lot of the stuff there, like Nick Pope, a little bit on Richard Dolan, some of the major cases. But I think to cut to the chase about this Pentagon thing, really what it is, I think, is a setup for the possible alien invasion scenario. That, I think, is what's behind it. They want to have another scam they can pull out of the drawer if the COVID scam doesn't quite get them what they want, and the climate change scam doesn't quite get them what they want. So what I go through here is, from the research I've been doing since 2003, I say this. I'll just read these 6 points out. Decades ago, flying saucers either crashed or were brought down, for example, near Roswell, New Mexico, in June or July 1947, because that impact probably happened right at the end of June, and then it was just into July by the time they actually got out there and found it and started poking around the bits. Bodies and material were recovered from that site, and that wasn't the only one, by the way. Discoveries were made relating to mental phenomena. Where does that come from? Well, actually, this comes from a disclosure document which is 70 years old, right? And it's the Wilbert Smith memo, which was found in 1979 by Nick Velasquez in the University of Ottawa archives. This is a high-resolution image of the document. You can find this very easily on the internet, and this tells you 500 times more than the Pentagon report, which has been released, and many people have talking about this. Wilbert Smith was talking about mental phenomena connected to the sources. He talked in this memo about a crash and bodies being recovered, and he was given the information about the secrecy of the UFOs by Dr. Robert Sarbacher, and that was disclosed in a telephone call by to Stanton Friedman in 1983. So Smith says why he was interested in the flying saucers came from his research into geomagnetics and radio wave propagation, and I've talked about that in some of the talks I've done. And if you look at, I think, page 2, or is it maybe on page 3, this is where he talks about it being the most highly classified subject in the US government's purview.
It says there, point A, I can't quite read it, but the something is the most highly classified subject.
I'll zoom in once it's finished loading. It's quite a high resolution file.
That's it. The matter is the most highly classified subject in the United States government. Higher than the H-bomb. Yeah. And, there's various details that Smith came out with, both in this memo and later on. And Grant Cameron originally wrote a lot of that up, and I kind of repackaged it. So they've got stuff, right? They've got stuff. They've had stuff for decades. And as I've said in my article, they actually, what it's to do with is energy, propulsion, and other technologies were secretly developed either by using or copying or merely being inspired by the capabilities of the recovered materials or items. One of the interesting elements of that is this that people have probably heard of, but it's worth investigating it a bit more, is the stories of this memory metal that they recovered, and you could scrunch it up and it would return to the original shape. Now, that hasn't come from just one source. That's come from multiple sources. And indeed, an interesting source that I heard relatively recently, within the last 5, 6, 7 years, was Jerry Croth, who was working as a lecturer somewhere in the US. And he was quite a young man in the 1960s, I think this was. And a pupil brought into his class this piece of metal that his dad or his uncle had given him, and showed it to Jerry Croth, and it matched the description of the memory metal. So this was completely independent of people like Frankie Rowe, who was the Roswell witness who held this in a hand, and Jesse Marcel and Jesse Marcel Jr., who held this metal. That apparently ended up at Wright-Patterson. The other thing which the UFO community will not talk about anywhere really to speak of is weapon systems being developed and warfare methods that were developed from and with these technologies. And some of that technology, which manipulates matter and energy at a basic level, and that it can affect gravity as well, that's, I think, pretty well established. This was used by someone on 9/11 to destroy most of the World Trade Center complex, and the effects of the use of that technology did not disappear immediately. And that's all covered in Dr. Judy Wood's book, Where Did the Towers Go?, which I've been banging on about for since it came out 11 years ago, or just about 10 and a half years ago. So all this is known and established. Those 6 points
anyone that wants to find evidence for those, I can show them where to look. And the Acknowledged book will show you all the links to find all that stuff and more. I mean, we haven't even talked about the Star Child skull today. I think we've talked about that before.
Yes, we have. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I just want to point out that a couple of people in the comment section, Mark Conlon as well, hi Mark, have said that are they gearing up for Project Bluebeam, and that's kind of what you just mentioned there with this alien invasion. Of course, those that don't know what Project Bluebeam is, it's this holographic technology that people believe could have been involved on 9/11. Has certainly been trialed around the world in some areas, some covert operations. Was it somewhere like Cuba where they managed to project God or the Virgin Mary or something?
There was something, yes, and I think this was something that Alex Jones talked about on one of his programs. They talked about projecting life-size or giant-sized images of Allah in Muslim countries, and this was talked about seriously in some defense report or something, and they said they claimed they had the technology to do this. And Mark Conlon is quite right, and he's done a lot of research into the issues with the planes on 9/11. And I think from what Mark's researched and what Richard D. Hall has done, Chris Hampton, and some of the other people that have looked into this, the plane crashes that were seen at the World Trade Center weren't real. They were some type of image projection system, right? And most people still think that those planes were real because they did look real. But you could see from, if you study the videos of the crashes are not crashes of Boeing
of a plane, of an aluminium plane.
Correct. There might be crashes of a missile, possibly. That's still not, I don't think, possible to be absolutely sure on that one. But that you can be sure that those aren't crashes of planes.
Yeah.
Right. So if you plug together, and then let's just go through this in slight order, because in this article which I wrote a few weeks ago now, because the reason why I wrote this was because of this, and this is something I learned from a chap I spoke to in he lives in the Czech Republic, and I found out that Mark McCandlish died, and this happened in April, right? And Mark McCandlish died in April, right? But apparently he'd been asked to testify at the Senate UFO UAP meeting in June. So McCandlish had been asked to testify there, but he didn't just die in April as such. He died with 2 shotgun wounds to the head, allegedly suicide. Now, Mark McCandlish, he's been telling this story about a guy that he knew in the defense industry who went to an air show in 1988, I think it was, in Palmdale, or it's California. I get the location mixed up. But he's got videos. He's been talking about this for like 20 odd years, at least 20 years. You can look. I'll just click this, and you can see this come up. He's done is that you could just look Mark McCandlish on YouTube. Look for ARV, Alien Reproduction Vehicle. I think this one, for example, is 2 hours 20 minutes. Very detailed presentation. He's talked about other secret aircraft for years that he's known of. He talked about this crash in I think in Eastern Europe, somewhere, of another type of advanced aircraft. So, in other words, the whole thrust of this Pentagon report is, we might have found something. We don't really know what it is, so give us some more money, and then we'll tell you. Once we've got the research. Mark McCandlish is telling the opposite of that. They know exactly what it is. They developed it from some sort of reverse engineered technology, and it was flying by probably the mid to late 60s.
Yep.
And here's the plans for it that were described to me by people that I know in the industry. Right. So if he's going to go and testify at this committee, whenever it was last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was meant to have been held, then it's rather going to put a bad light on this other narrative in this silly 9-page nonsense report.
Yeah.
And so what do? They kill him. That's my take.
He kills himself.
He killed himself. They induce him to kill himself.
Yeah. It's no laughing matter, but for me, it's so this happens all the time, does it? Not
Yeah.
just with the UFO world. Of course, it happened
No.
to people like Dr. David Kelly, you
Correct.
know, all these people. Whenever they're about to blow a whistle, and you know, make the shit hit the fan, for example.
If you're talking about the wrong thing in the wrong place at the wrong time, you know, then you're a target. I mean, it's all
Yeah.
right for him to talk about this when, you know, they're still happy with the UFO ridicule factor, you know, but now they've realised that, you know, a lot of people are starting to think a bit more now. It's still a lot. It's a lot to us. Still like maybe less than 1% of the population, but it might be, you know, it might have gone from 0.1% of the population or 0.01% of the population to 1% or something. It might have multiplied by a factor of 10. So they've got to manage that. So they need something to scare people.
I think the problem is, you know, like I say, this happens across the board. You know, it happens to even down to people like Chester Bennington. Is it Chester Bennington, the Linkin Park singer, and Chris Cornell?
Okay.
Basically, these people were beginning to were working on a documentary about child trafficking and paedophilia within Hollywood and within the music industry and stuff.
That's right.
And within a couple of weeks of each other, they killed themselves. I think, and there's a thing called Avicii. Of course, I'm not up to date on modern people, but
Isaac Cappy is another one as well.
Isaac Cappy, yes.
He named Tom Hanks, didn't he? And then
he was the big person for Tom Hanks, actually, and then he ended up throwing himself off a bridge. And killing himself. So this happens all the time, and for me, it's got to a point where if someone is suicided, as it's called, it almost puts credence to what they're saying. You know, they'd actually be better letting these people live.
But I think that the problem is, you know, as I see it, people like Stephen Greer, who actually was instrumental in bringing forward, you know, Mark McCandlish as a witness. Well, actually, I say this. Greer has said that this is a CIA. I don't know if he said it's CIA, but he said it's an operation to bring in the fake alien invasion. But Greer's got to say that because that's what he said through Carol Rosin back in 2001. You know. And Carol Rosin talked about the Werner von Braun, you know, statement to her that the last card was going to be the extraterrestrial threat. You know, and I think that's what this is a possible lead up to that.
Absolutely. And there was a guy called I want to say Max. I'm probably going to have to really search this. There was a guy called Max. He was a young guy, and he got killed. Well, he apparently committed suicide, but he got killed. And he sent a text to his mom. Here you go. So Max Spears.
Oh, him? No. Yeah.
Have you heard of him? Well,
I have. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you'll have an opinion on this, but he sent a text to his mum or something saying, "If anything happens to me, investigate." And then he was found dead not long before he was due to go to a convention or something and give some evidence that he supposedly had. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, you need to look into Max Spears a bit more because he was a drug addict. I know that Richard D. Hall did a bit of investigation into that story, and the way that was put out in the media was kind of like a bit, you know, it was a bit served on a plate up through the media, and I think it was. I don't know how much of Max Spears' story was true. I don't know how much it was able to be verified by other means.
Okay, that's fine.
So I wasn't particularly comfortable with, and I mean, Miles Johnson covered him heavily, you know, and Miles Johnson's put out a lot of other stuff which is difficult to corroborate, to say the least. But some of it, I mean, there's certainly some of the Miles Johnson material that is very, very interesting, and he's brought out a couple of very interesting witnesses, but difficult to corroborate.
I know. I think it's Marty's mentioned here about the Star Child School, which we will touch on in a minute, Marty. I do want to come back to that. Martin, yes, I think Max Spears was killed in Poland, and Mark Conlon mentioned Rick Clay, of course, who did great work around the Olympic symbology and stuff back in the day, who then apparently went and killed himself again. Or not him again, but another person who was killed again. I just want to bring up, Andrew, something we spoke of off air. There's within the last month, it was announced that there was a new group, a new alphabet group that's come out, the International Coalition for Extraterrestrial Research, or ICER, I think it's pronounced, ICER. Now, this is headed up by Gary Hesseltine, and people like Dave Hodrian, the chairman of BUFOG, are in it. And obviously, for people like that, it's massive. It's a big organisation that's gonna, in their opinion, break new ground. It's but truthfully, in your opinion, is it going to change anything, or is it another bunch of people trying their best maybe to get word out? Maybe high up within the organisation, it's controlled by a couple of gatekeepers who will determine what they can actually research and what they can actually put out there. Is it just another dead end?
Well, my opinion is yes, it is. And I know some of the people involved, and I've told them what I think, what evidence I think is the most important and why I think it's the most important, and that there is still a problem. And then what I was going to say is that who else, apart from maybe Stephen Greer, has talked about the Mark McCandlish death in connection with this? There's I think maybe Dark Journalist has talked about it. I'm not sure if he specifically mentioned it, but I think he made some reference to it. The UFO community should be talking about that, because Mark McCandlish was very, very visible, and he's been hosted by lots of UFO groups. So his death should be automatically connected and spoken about by, and I may be decrying Richard Dolan because I haven't listened to his latest discussion on any of this. So he may well have mentioned the death of Mark McCandlish, and he may well have, put it into a format that I have in that article. I don't know, but I think this should be more widely acknowledged by the UFO research community, and that is a theme in my knowledge book, that I think the UFO research community should be paying attention to the things that are in my book. I don't mean to sort of sound arrogant, but I think it's true, and that's why I've kind of distanced myself to some degree from these groups, because it's some really, really serious stuff. Like weaponry, as I say, is a key one. Technology, mind control technology, remote influence telepathy. Carl James and we recently did a discussion about Babylon 5, right, at the science fiction show from the 1990s. And why I'm bringing that up, it might seem like a segue, is that one of the really highbrow concepts in that program, which kind of blew me away at the time, was that the aliens had ships that were flown by telepaths. You had to be, in fact, for the Earth powers, they wanted to replicate the alien technology in these ships, but they needed telepaths to fly them. That's the only way they could fly them. Yeah, that was a concept that's mentioned. Well, not quite in that sense, but Wilbert Smith mentioned that in the 1950 memo. That it's just these ships seem to have some connection with mental phenomena, is the way that he put it in that memo.
Yeah.
And I'd never heard of that, of course, when I watched Babylon 5, because I only knew about the Smith memo, I think, in 2004.
Yeah.
So this is the level that the UFO community should be at by now, because that information has been there since at least 1979, when Nick Velasquez covers that memo. So that in itself is over 40 years ago.
So what you're saying is all these groups are around. They've been going for years, and they're not making any ground. They're ignoring really high end thought processes and high end ideas and possibilities. And we've spoken about this, because where my research falls, it kind of is in more of the paranormal world. But it's the same there, where people still think that ghosts are dead people, that they're unwilling to accept that it's another kind of paranormal entity, that it's not going to always just be a dead person talking to you. And I think that goes with UFOs. I get really annoyed at how so many people are fixated on a UFO being a nuts and bolt craft. We've spoken about this before. Very few people are willing to accept that a UFO or an extraterrestrial being could be something that isn't flesh and blood. It could be interdimensional. It could have a little bit of a paranormal aspect to it. And do you think that the scope for people to be looking that way, where they don't seem to be?
Correct, and I think that's where you get the crossover between the paranormal phenomena and the UFO stuff. You know, if you're talking about telepathic control of ships, then that kind of has some kind of crossover with what mediums apparently do, where they seem to be able to read people's minds somehow or through some thought process, and that gets you obviously to the underlying substrate, which is consciousness. That's the big topic which wraps, encapsulates both of these things and many more. And in fact, going back to Wilbert Smith, he realized this essentially, and he realized he had to start thinking about metaphysics, and he talked about that in 1958. And he realized it's like science is one part of it, religion is another part, and then he said that he was and he realized telepathy was another part. He realized that was important. And the contactees that he was speaking to were receiving information, presumably through a process like telepathy. Yeah. And he just took that at face value and worked with it, and then realized, yes, that's the only explanation for what's happening. Yeah. And he wrote all that up, and he did that over a process of about 8, 9, 10 years.
And do you find yourself, like I do, as in the paranormal world, I find myself a bit of an outsider, a bit of an outcast. I've got into many arguments about, telling people that they're not talking to dead people and whatnot. But I also find myself drained of energy. I kind of give up on it because they're never going to evolve as a field of investigators. The research is never going to go anywhere. We go around in circles, and just as this latest report has proven, it's tantalised the likes of Gary Heseltine, of Dave Hodrian, these really serious investigators. It's dangled another carrot, and now they're going to spend years looking at that again, as opposed to focusing where they should be.
Yeah, that's it. And I think that's the objective. But I think we've got to accept that there are maybe several different reasons for being involved with paranormal or UFO research. And one of those is simply having a vague interest in it. Oh, yeah, this is a bit strange. It's out of all the ordinary. It's some people are interested in football and some aren't. Some people are interested in UFOs and some aren't. And some people go to a club go to the pub or a meetup group to talk about football, just as they will go to a meetup group to talk about UFOs. But they're not really into this finding out where humans came from. Is there, finding out how you can prove if you have a soul or not, or prove that you have a spirit that leaves your body and does stuff. They're not interested in that side particularly. They've never really. They just got a vague sort
of. Which they should be. I mean, it's kind of like you're interested in the flavour of crisps, but you're not interested in how the crisps are made and where the crisps have
that's
come
a good
from.
analogy. It's a good analogy.
And I've got crisps on the brain. But yeah, it frustrates the hell out of me. I just want to go back a little bit to Marty and his point on the Star Child School. Mark's touched on crop circles and energy connections. I do want to do a show at some point, Andrew, on crop circles, because I know you've written extensively about that. Someone's also put, it's Marty again. How does I'll bring this up quick, Marty, before we talk about the school. How does the extraterrestrial phenomenon relate to the paranormal, different dimensional beings? What are your thoughts on alien intervention with regards to human DNA? Martin, we don't really have time. We've got about 10 minutes left to go into that first part. I'll talk to you and I'll send you some videos that I've done previously that talk about this, because in my opinion they really do relate. Let's talk about the Star Child School. So you worked on this with Lloyd Pye, who was a big advocate of this, I believe. Essentially I did. I mean, I didn't sort of work. I was more like a bit of a backroom boy, you might say, for him for some of his things that he was looking at. I mean, I've got the PowerPoint up that I put together, which is from a lot of stuff that he gave me. I'll just share that. I'll bring that show when I get back to the StreamYard screen. Here we go. Let me share that. Oh, you've got that up, right? That's fine then. So. He had these two skulls. They were found in a cave in Mexico in 1930, well preserved because it was a fairly sort of stable environment there inside this cave.
One was shown to be a human skull, the top one here, and the other one sort of just at a very passing glance looked human, but then you see it's got all these physical differences. And those photographs probably taken in about 1999, around about then. And you can see you've got the same main bones, but they're, as he said, they're reconfigured.
Yeah.
And then you see you have this dimple here as well which proves it's not the skull of a hydrocephalic.
Right.
And this is if you go onto a Wikipedia entry about this, it will claim that it's a deformed human skull. That is a lie. It's a total lie and has been scientifically shown to be a lie in multiple different ways. So you get the eye sockets are only half an inch deep, and the human eye sockets are 2 inches deep at the deepest point. And there's no brow ridges, which are these little sort of ridges at the top of your eyes here. The Star Child doesn't have those. It's got reduced chewing muscle size, and it's got no inion. It's got a lack of an inion, which is like a little nodule at the back of your skull where it sticks out. That's missing on the Star Child.
I'm just feeling that now. Make sure I've got it.
Yeah. The eye sockets, as I say, and you can see that it's kind of like this bottom bone has been raised up, and so the joining point of these three bones is much higher on the back of the skull. I forget the particular names of the occipital stretched high and flattened, which is I think this is the occipital bone here, this lower one here. And then this sort of crease or dent, which shows it's not hydrocephalic, as I said. The neck hole is completely different. It's different shape. The head attached differently. If you feel inside of this here, it was quite smooth, apparently, which was a problem because you need it to be rough. Because if that inside surface inside the skull is smooth, it means that the brain would fall out.
Right. Yeah.
So it appears that the Star Child's brain was different to human brain. Else, from the morphology of the skull and stuff, it would have fallen out of its neck. According to what Lloyd explained. Right. So it's completely different. The bone chemistry is all different as well. The bone is much more like collagen. There's the X-ray. I mean, there's almost no comparison seen in that X-ray. It has no sinuses, which was thought to be definitely not human, but apparently some humans are occasionally born without sinuses. It's quite rare, but it's there's just no comparison. Between.
So what was the? Obviously, I imagine people would say that it was faked. It was a fake artifact. It was manufactured.
Yeah, people can say what they like about it, but that's not what the DNA test showed.
Yeah.
If you do, also let's see if I've got a picture of the actual skull with it cut open. You can see all the data that was gathered. This was gathered over a period of about 10 years.
Where was it found, Andrew? Where was the skull originally found?
In a cave in Mexico, about 100 miles from Chihuahua.
Right.
I think I've got that towards the beginning of this presentation somewhere. Let's see. I'm flicking through very quickly. It's all online. I've done a whole presentation on this as the whole YouTube video, so you can find out about the owners.
There we go.
As well.
There we go. Yeah.
So it's about the southwest of Chihuahua. And Lloyd had said that they could probably find the location if they really tried hard, but they never had the money to go and do that. It wasn't on the list of priorities when they had so much else to try and test.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of area where it would have been found. That's what the landscape is like there. Quite inside the caves, it's quite dry, and that's why it was well preserved. Yeah. So there's he's done. There's a whole YouTube talk that he did in 2012, which has got all the most up-to-date information. It was radiocarbon dated twice, plus or minus 40 years and it was 900 years old, plus or minus 40 years is what I'm trying to say. Both skulls were dated the same way, and it's about when they did the DNA tests. Let's see if I can go to the relevant slide, because they talk about it being progeria and all of that. Let's just go second. There were multiple DNA tests done on it as the techniques got better, and they looked at these DNA sequences with the National Institutes of Health database, and they concluded from what they were able to recover, they didn't recover all of it. They only recovered, I think, much less than 1%. That it was more similar to dog DNA was more similar to human DNA than the Star Child DNA was.
Wow.
The DNA is very, very different to human, even though it superficially looks the same. The probability that such a highly specific arrangement of changes in a small fragment could have occurred by accumulation of sequencing errors is extremely low, if not close to zero. Nor could this arrangement have occurred due to contamination with the DNA of any known species. So, in other words, they were recovering DNA that wasn't found in any species on Earth from their database of 100 animals. So, you can't explain that by contamination, because contamination would produce, more known samples. This had less. So from this evidence, one may conclude that the underlying biochemistry of the entity's life form must either be the same as or highly similar to humans or other species, yet the use of the genetic code, which still remains universal, is distinctively different, implying that this life form is very likely the result of a markedly variant and non-intersecting evolutionary process. And that's from the geneticist who was doing these tests. So
why wasn't this? I mean, to me, obviously, I've heard of this, but I move in these circles, and most people that do would, of course, heard of this. If I was to ask someone like my wife or a friend, have you ever heard of this? Of course, they would say no. Why has nothing ever been made of this? What's your reasoning for that?
Well, I think it answers the question: has alien life ever visited Earth?
Yeah.
Yes, it has, and here's the physical evidence that it left behind. Now, of course, people have said to me, well, it could just be an unknown species, never discovered before humanoid. It could be of a race of beings that live inside the Earth or something, or, half a mile, 10 miles down below the surface. It could be, but we haven't seen other evidence of that that's corroborates with this. So and again, if you look at this, it actually looks like the skull of a grey alien. It matches the morphology of a grey alien, particularly, and that I won't go into it now, but that also has some evidence behind it as well. So I think this is probably the skull of a grey alien.
And do you think that it would pose too many questions to the general public, and they're a bit worried?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would, and it would, I go through some of this in the presentation that, this was presented to several scientists and they just ran away from it. Lloyd did this. He was doing this for a couple of years. He took it to people who had laboratories and they wouldn't even pick it up. They wouldn't touch it because they could see just by looking at it what it was, that it was game over, for their Darwinian evolution and all of that. It's game over for that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's game over for the people who want to stay in there. I'm just intrigued by the mystery of it all. The mystery ends.
Yeah.
Well, at least some of it does.
That's interesting, actually. You say that. Do you think that some people, and I'm talking about, really high-end researchers here, who, as we've just mentioned, I realise we're running short on time here, but probably a decent ending point. Some of these people we've mentioned, they stay away from certain subjects that we think they should be tackling, and therefore the field has kind of plateaued a little bit. Do you think that they're too in love with the mystery? It's almost like they don't want it to end. If you're enjoying a really good film and the end of the film, they're going to reveal who the murderer was, who did it, but you're enjoying the film so much you almost don't want them to reveal who the murderer is, because when they do, well, that's the end of the film, and you've got to turn it off. Do you think there's an element of that with these people?
I have no doubt that that's a factor, and also, some people make a living from this, going on. So, they haven't got a vested interest necessarily in answering certain questions. And the whole terminology, truth seekers, that's a very common term. What about truth finders?
Yeah.
What about truth knowers, truth speakers, not truth seekers?
Yeah.
You know, so that's different for everybody, you know. And I, for myself, I'm quite confident in saying I think you can establish certain things as truth, and not. You can stop looking for those things. You can then move on to another question, which that then triggers, you know. But other people say, no, well, I'm still not sure. You know, I still need more evidence. Well, you know, how much more do you need? You know. It is a journey for some people, but it's, you know, some people, I certainly feel I've reached certain destinations with certain topics and certain aspects of certain topics, and I want to move on to other ones. You know, that's my own way of dealing with all of this. You know, and perhaps it's why I've diversified into a number of fields, because I feel I've got to sort of at least a staging point in one field, like with 9/11, for example. Once you've read Dr. Judy Wood's book, you kind of get to where can I go from there?
Yeah.
There is nowhere else to go except to try and disclose it. You can't really, you know that the buildings were destroyed with an energy weapon. Where do you go from there? You then need access to classified information and a security clearance to go beyond that, which is, of course, what we tried to do. Same with this. I think to go beyond this, you need a security clearance. You know. Because I think somebody knows where this came from. They probably know which planet it came from, or whether indeed it is, you know, an earthbound species that somehow got wiped out or something, you know, back in 900 years ago. And they'll know the story behind it somewhere. I think somebody knows this story. You know, it's a bit like I say in my solar system book, Secrets in the Solar System, and the Finding the Secret Space Program. You know, I think you just need a security clearance, and you'll get a fair bit more information than is here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll leave it there. Obviously, thank you very much for coming on. Apologies to the people for the earlier shenanigans that we had. It seems it was my fault, but I think we solved it pretty quickly. We didn't really have any problems after that. With the next show will be 2 weeks today, all being well. So that will be the 5th, the 12th. The 19th of July. Andrew, you're welcome to back on then. We'll find something to discuss. I would like to touch a little bit. We did mention before about Pizzagate and that side of things. We'll do that at some point. Maybe next show, maybe not. It will just require a lot of research before we do it. And also, I'd like to do a show. I have mentioned this before on the fake Paul McCartney, and I don't know where you stand on that.
Yeah. I've got a whole article about that. I've done
brilliant. Oh, fantastic! I've got some stuff on that. Should we do that then? Should we?
If you want to. Yeah.
Let's go with the fake full McCartney, as they call him. Let's go with that then. So the 19th of July, we'll be talking about the
PID. Paul is dead. Or
yeah.
That's the moniker that's given to it. PID research is kind of like the easy way of saying it.
It's it fascinates me because when you actually look at the evidence and the things that have happened, you can't ignore it.
No,
I don't think. Yeah, but
I agree.
We'll save it for the show.
Sure.
So thank you to everyone for joining in.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
And please do share this show around. Andrew uploads it onto his Check the Evidence page. I share it onto my the Collective Conspiracy YouTube page. And just share the Collective Conspiracy Facebook group around as well, please, and let's get some more views, because I know it does well on Andrew's page as well, which is great. Martin's pointed out that when we do that show, it will be Freedom Day. Brilliant. It will be the day that masks are no longer needed, supposedly. Great. Well, thank you as ever, Andrew.
Thank you, Kieran.
Thank you to everyone else, and take care. See you soon.